Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 26.3 Beta 1 released to developers and public beta testers a couple weeks ago, and iOS 26.2 released to the public a few weeks ago. But there's even more to talk about since the iOS 26.3 Beta 1 is out. What's new video. We'll talk about the latest Apple news, we'll talk about overall features, and we'll talk about the overall experience. Not just my experience, but your experience based off the YouTube community poll on the post page, where at the time of this video there's over 18,000 votes and 246 comments. I've gone over all the comments to determine what the update is like so far, so be sure to stick around toward the end of the video where I'll read some of your comments as well. Now on December 30th, Apple posted that something big was coming to Apple Fitness Plus on their Instagram account. In the teaser video, there's actually people holding up newspapers that say things such as 2026 plans are under wraps for now, and a couple other things as well. However, on Friday, Apple announced new workouts. If we go to their press release, you can see here where it says stay active in the new year with Apple Watch. Fitness Plus offers an exciting new lineup of programs, artist spotlight workouts, and time to walk episodes to support users in reaching their goals. If we scroll down here, this is a pretty lengthy article. Starting January 5th, Apple Fitness Plus introduces 4 brand new workout programs that offer users weekly training plans to help take the guesswork out of how to reach their goals. So there's a lot of information here. If you want to check it out, I'll link it in the description. To go along with fitness, Apple also released new ads for Apple Watch called Quit Quitting this past week. On their YouTube channel, under the Shorts page, you can see a few different ones here. So they're to motivate you into the new year. And there's also a new ad called Detectives 8x Zoom, shot on iPhone 17 Pro. And it says Crash Zoom. So you'll see that here. Those are all available that happened this past week. So if you want to check them out, go to Apple's YouTube channel and you can see them here. Back in November, I mentioned how Apple partnered with Red once again, where qualifying purchases at Apple would result in a $5 donation from Apple to Red. You can see more information about it here with their partnership with Red, and it looks like Red confirmed on X that donations reached $3 million to the foundation. I would love to see their partnership brought back to go along with Red iPhones, iPhone cases. A product Red variant of the 17 Pro Max would look great, and they used to introduce those mid-year. I would love to see them bring that back, and it also benefits the actual foundation as well. More Apple products were classified as vintage this week, where Apple added the iPhone 11 Pro, iPhone 8 Plus, iPad Air 3, along with the Apple Watch Series 5 and a few other things as well. You can see it on their page that says obtaining service for your Apple product after an expired warranty. If you go down through here, go to iPhone for example, you can scroll down through and you'll see the 11 Pro Max, 11 Pro, and all of the things that are considered vintage now. So I'll link this in the description below if you want to check it out, but quite a few things are now vintage, including the last Intel MacBook Air. So they've added that here, where the only Intel Mac that they support still is the 2019 Mac Pro. So it looks like they're not supporting it for much longer. Apple revealed its yearly New Year sale for Japan, where they offer gift cards and free limited edition AirTags. You can see that Mac Rumors posted about it, where the post here shows the new AirTag, and it says the AirTag features a special engraving of a daruma, a traditional Japanese talisman commonly associated with perseverance, good fortune, and the achievement of goals. The AirTag offer is limited to 65,000 units in total. So you can see what they look like here, and Apple typically does this every single year. As far as new features this week, while iOS 26.3 Beta 1 has been out for a little while, we'll recap some of the features in a moment. But as far as new features, there was an odd new splash screen that popped up when I opened my AirPods this time around. I captured it with a screenshot, and it also, when I was getting ready for this video, popped up on iOS 26.2 as well on the iPhone Air. So for whatever reason, it's re-popping up this splash screen where it says what's new in AirPods with live translation with Apple Intelligence, charging reminders, new charging status, pause media on sleep, and camera control. So all of those popped up, and it had me set everything up again as well. I'm not sure why. I didn't reset anything. I've been using them all along, but it kept asking me about these and then showed me about charging AirPods as well. When it comes to new features, well, there's a few things to recap quickly. If we go into settings, for example, go to General, scroll to the bottom, we have new transfer or reset options with transfer to Android. So that's a new option that's now available on iOS 26.3 Beta 1. I haven't tried it yet. I will try it in the future when everything's finalized, but I don't want things to fail, such as maybe transferring an eSIM. So I'll give it a try once it's finally finished and available to the public, or maybe on the RC version. Also, if we go back into our settings, go under notifications, there's also a new option here for notification forwarding, where we may be able to forward notifications to a third-party watch or third-party accessory. So again, that's something new. Also, we have an update with Wallpaper, so the Wallpaper and Astronomy has been split up. With Wallpaper, they've split up Weather and Astronomy into their own respective categories where they were combined before. And also, iOS 26.3 will bring the ability for third-party devices to pair with iPhone, similar to how AirPods pair. That goes along with that notification update as well. When it comes to new app updates, there's not a whole lot to talk about, but there was a Geekbench update. So if we go into Geekbench, you'll see here where it has improved hardware identification. Now, you want to make sure you're updated if you're following along with Geekbench scores, as sometimes they change the overall scores. This time around, it should just be hardware identification where it recognizes this is a 17 Pro Max, for example. And speaking of the iPhone 17 Pro and iPhone 17, the iPhone 17 offered one of the best phones in a long time for the base model. However, it seems that next year's iPhone 18 may not launch in 2026, according to many who report the change to iPhone releases. Apple is supposedly changing the release schedule and pushing the base iPhone 18, maybe even the iPhone Air, to spring of 2027, around the time of the iPhone SE typically. So maybe we'll see a launch that time where we get the Pro and maybe the folding phones in the late September timeframe. Also, iPhone 17 Pro continues to be a great phone, but quite a few are still reporting static from the speakers when they charge the phone. So if we go ahead and plug one in here, I really don't have that issue. I haven't seen it on this phone anyway. And you can hear if I hold this up to my microphone, there's nothing coming out of the speakers. Mac Rumors is now posting about this along with Apple forums, and it's on Reddit as well, so hopefully there's a fix coming very, very soon. When it comes to releases this week, Apple was on vacation until January 2nd, according to the Feedback app. The note has since been removed now that they're back at work, but we could expect some updates very soon. As I mentioned last week, Apple stopped signing iOS 26.1, which means there's no longer an option to downgrade other than iOS 26.2, or 26.3 Beta 1 for developers. Typically, when this happens, we get another release within a couple of weeks. So based off of that, it's possible we could see an iOS 26.2.1 this coming week. We don't know that for sure, but we've seen that in the past, such as last year. We had an iOS 18.2.1 that fixed additional issues, maybe the static issue, so we could see something like that. Also, I would expect, though, for sure, an iOS 26.3 Beta 2. Typically the second week of January, Apple always releases the second beta, so I would expect that, maybe some more refinements, some updates there as well. So that's what we're expecting as far as beta releases. Then, of course, the public release could be at the end of January or early February. When it comes to the AirPods Pro 3 experience, well, I mentioned a few things in the past where they've been mostly good for me, but I'm hearing more people talk about static on them. So if you're having static, it seems to be fairly common. It looks like they need to address a few different issues here where there's some static when you're using them for long periods of time. That happens to me on the Mac if I have a few devices around. If I turn on an iPhone, for example, and an iPad, typically these will break up a little bit. So definitely still an issue there. But overall, very good. Not really too many issues other than with the Vision Pro disconnecting or not connecting properly. When it comes to the iOS 18.7.3 experience, there's not much to talk about here other than that it's just great and stable overall. There's not a single person complaining about it, and there's many people regretting updating to iOS 26, wishing they'd stayed on iOS 18. So iOS 18 was pretty terrible at the start, but now it's much, much better. When it comes to iOS 26.2, well, it's been a few weeks now, and we basically know how it is. While it did fix a lot of issues with iOS 26.1 and earlier, there's still some issues that remain. For example, it's much smoother overall with performance. The widget panel stutter is gone, as we have it on the iPhone Air, but the top complaints are really the keyboard lag this time around. So if we go into Notes, I've mentioned a keyboard bug where you're typing this is a newer note. Sometimes if you're typing maybe the letter N, it would mistype and press the B next to it, even though you've pressed down on the correct letter. Also, other people are saying it's just not typing at all, or it's just very laggy in general. There's complaints all over the internet about it. Hopefully Apple has seen it, and hopefully they're working on it. This is definitely something that needs to be addressed here. RAM management is still an issue. When you go into apps, they often reload after opening maybe one or two apps, so definitely still an issue there. And CarPlay still has connectivity issues, so sometimes it's delayed or disconnects. Sometimes you can fix it by toggling on airplane mode before connecting, and then toggling it off, connecting to your car, and it seems to work. Also, those having issues with disconnect, it can be related to VPN as well, so make sure you're not using a VPN, see if that resolves it. But many people are just having things such as Maps freeze, Waze freeze, and other apps as well. Some people still have no internet, just randomly on their phone. That seems to be less widespread, but it's still an issue. Of course, the wallpaper bug is still there, and you'll see if we swipe up, it might desaturate a little bit. It's definitely improved, but it's darker than I would like to see here. I would like to see it just fully vibrant like it is on the lock screen. Finally, if you didn't see my video last week, there's a tip to fix the lag if you're having issues on the iPhone 12 and 13 series, for example. Try turning on reduced transparency. This helps, of course, if you don't like liquid glass, but if you go into accessibility, display and text size, turn on reduced transparency, many people say it fixes the lag on older phones. So keep that in mind if you're having some issues there. When it comes to iOS 26.3 Beta 1, I've been using it full time as my main phone, and 70 to 80% of users now say that iOS 26.3 Beta 1 has fixed the lag or performance issues even on older phones such as the iPhone 13 Pro Max and iPhone 14 Pro Max. Idle battery drain is improved. It's pretty stable overall, but there's still some crashes I'll mention in a moment. Performance is generally good, especially on older phones. Control center haptic lag is removed, or gone it seems for most people. But RAM management is hit or miss. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. Thermal management has been greatly improved, and it's smoother for most. Also, when it comes to bugs, there's scrolling lockups, particularly in YouTube. A lot of people are seeing this. We're seeing a lot of bugs with the YouTube app lately, so that seems to be an app issue where they need to update that. And also recently, when I saved a photo, and when I went into Photos, it actually crashed and did a respring. So that booted back to the lock screen. The display goes black, you get a little status indicator, and then it goes back to the lock screen. That's something that I've seen that 1 or 2 times on the beta. So it's not perfect, but it's much better. People using WhatsApp are having issues with calls not starting or disconnecting altogether. Again, that could be related to an app not complying with the latest update, but again, this is a beta. And then camera issues are still a problem. If I go into camera, you'll see it's just very blue. The white balance is blue for some reason, but if I maybe zoom into 2x, go back to 1, the white balance corrects as it should, and that's just a very odd issue that I've seen repeated throughout on my phone. Also, when you're taking a flash and you're on the main camera, sometimes it will freeze completely. There's also some visual bugs here and there, jittery swiping on the iPhone Air, for example, and there's odd volume levels still for me with CarPlay. For example, I was using it the other day using Google Maps or Apple Maps. I tried it with both, and I was listening to a podcast. When I was listening to the podcast, if it would announce maybe a turn, for example, for my next move there, sometimes it would announce the turn, then it would go back to playing the podcast and the volume would go way down. Then it would announce the next part of the navigation and then the volume would go way up on the podcast. I've seen this over and over, and hopefully it's resolved. However, CarPlay is fixed for most on iOS 26.3, but there's other odd bugs such as being blurred in CarPlay and maps having pixelation for quite a few people on Mercedes. That seems to be a widespread issue. When it comes to performance, it's generally very good. The only thing I've heard is on some older devices when you're scrolling, ProMotion isn't as fast. Some people say it's 80 Hz or below. So I haven't really seen that too much. It seems generally very smooth, but performance is pretty good overall. When it comes to heat and thermals, well, the phone was getting a little bit warmer today as I was using it outside of my house. I'm down to 44% battery, so let's go ahead and take a look. We'll run benchmarks, see how they heat up, and see what they respond with as far as thermals, and then we'll take a look at the benchmark scores as well. If we take a look with the thermal camera on iPhone 17 Pro Max running iOS 26.3 Beta 1, we're at about 34 degrees Celsius. On the iPhone Air running iOS 26.2, we're at about 39.5 degrees Celsius. So definitely fairly warm. I've seen it up to 40 typically on the iPhone Air, but generally where you would expect. Benchmarks just completed, and you'll see benchmarks are pretty good overall. 3,787 for single core, 9,828 for multi-core as far as the 17 Pro Max. So pretty good, well within the margin of error, doing well overall, no complaints there. When it comes to if you should install iOS 26.3 betas, at this point, if you're having a lot of issues with iOS 26.2, you could try it. However, just keep in mind it's a beta. It still has bugs. It's crashed for me a couple times. So if you're okay with that, or maybe you need to downgrade, just keep in mind you'll need a computer to do that and a backup. But overall, it seems to be pretty good for an early beta. As far as battery, well, iOS 18.7.3, of course, seems to be very consistent and quite good on the older devices. iOS 26.2, however, seems to be decent but not as good as 26.3. So let me share that with you as Cameron and Connor send in their battery life on each version. So thanks to Cameron for sending this in. This is on an iPhone 17 Pro Max with 100% battery health, and you'll see he has 8 hours and 33 minutes of screen active time, 3 hours and 41 minutes of screen idle time, and used 73% of his battery. So pretty good overall, still about 30+% left, and he should get over 10 hours of screen active time. Connor sent this one in on iOS 26.3 Beta 1, and he had 10 hours and 18 minutes of screen active time, 3 hours and 15 minutes of screen idle time, and used 92%. I'm seeing about the same battery life depending on how you use it, usually a little bit better though on iOS 26.3 Beta 1, depending on how you use it and what your apps are as far as what you use there. When it comes to battery life for me, if we go to settings, we'll go back here to battery, and if we take a look at battery health, I'm at 100% capacity with 44 cycles. I've been using it full time. And today, if we take a look at my battery usage, I've used 63% with 3 hours and 46 minutes of screen active time, 6 hours and 51 minutes of screen idle time. So not as good as the other people, but for me, it's decent overall. It seems to be improving and no real issues there. It gets me through a day despite it only saying about 4 hours of screen active time. So I think it will improve, especially with future betas. I continue to refine the overall system to see if I can get this to be used less, and I turn off background app processing and things in other apps as well. Now, as far as the overall experience, let's take a look at some of your comments. KPAX English said, I'm running iOS 26.2 on my iPhone 15 Pro Max and generally loving it. It's been stable, though I've noticed some glitches with the clean icons reloading and a bit of lag when switching apps. Not sure if it's software or my phone. The battery is a beast, getting me through heavy video recording and other tasks all day. Aside from some bugs, it's a great experience. C. Weber 9112 said, I'm on iOS 26.2 currently with my iPhone Air. One big issue I'm having is my connection to my AirPods. I'll be listening to music or a YouTube video and the sound goes completely robotic to the point that the sound stops altogether. I then have to close apps and reopen them again to temporarily correct the issue. This does not happen when I'm using my Bose Quiet Comfort headphones. True to Life 73 said, so far the 26.3 is running well on my iPhone 17 Pro. CarPlay is no longer experiencing a connection issue with my Pioneer head unit. Jared Tonk says, iOS 26.3 beta has been an excellent experience so far on my iPhone 13 Pro. Battery life has been surprisingly strong, performance feels smooth, and I have experienced little to no lag in everyday use. While there are still a few areas that need refinement, which is expected from a beta release, I am genuinely impressed overall. I would rate it an 8.5 out of 10. RangerFan05 said, great performance on my iPhone 16 on iOS 26.2 and better battery life than iOS 26.1. Can't wait for iOS 26.3. Ron Kronovich 9095 said, 26.2 running mostly good on my 17 Pro, with mostly very good battery life, but two problems. In the YouTube app and at least one other app, scrolling gets stuck. I move my finger to scroll and the screen is stuck for more than a couple seconds. Then it responds, then it gets stuck again. Happens intermittently. About 1 in 4 times, CarPlay takes a few minutes to connect, both wirelessly and via a cable. Ron Leedy says, for me, 26.3 Public Beta 1 has been more stable and better battery than any previous 26 betas. I had forgotten I was on a beta. When it comes to overall storage, let's go ahead and take a look under General and then iPhone Storage. We'll scroll to the bottom. On the left is iOS 26.2. On the right is iOS 26.3 Beta 1. It's the same size as last week, 23.08 gigabytes compared to 20.36 gigabytes. I'm using about 3 more gigabytes with Apple Intelligence. Now, some people have been concerned on 26.2 with system data using up more data. Typically, though, it's at the bottom, so you can ignore it. It goes up and down as needed, and as long as it's not stopping you from installing different apps because it's using up too much, I typically would ignore it overall. So I really wouldn't worry about that and just continue to use the phone. When it comes to iOS 18.7.3, it's the safety harbor. It gets an A+ as far as a grade, where iOS 18.7.3 after a few weeks is still considered the most stable and reliable version of iOS. It has the stability and battery life we expect from Apple on iPhone, and it just works. If you're still on iOS 18.7.3, I would stay there for now as it has the most recent security patches, and wait to see what iOS 26.3 is like once it's released to the public. When it comes to iOS 26.2, well, it's unfinished business. It gets a C+ so far, with iOS 26.2 bringing stabilization to iOS 26 and iOS 26.0.1, but it's still plagued by UI lag, for many with aggressive RAM management, and poor keyboard lag and input issues. It fixes battery for many, but it also is still lacking in many areas that require refinement and feels unfinished still. Apple knows this and seems to have improved a lot with iOS 26.3. iOS 26.3 Beta 1 is the return to form. It gets a B+ so far, where iOS 26.3 is off to a great start with massive improvements to thermal management and battery drain. It's a rare case when the first beta is better than the previous public release for most, and so far it's smooth, stable, and feels more polished just using it day to day. So it's a huge improvement there. So that's everything with iOS 26.2 and iOS 26.3 Beta 1. Hopefully we get those updates this coming week in just a few days, but let me know what you're looking most forward to and what you want from iOS 26 in the near future. Of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.